say. I felt a little bit like a human shield because the visiting or international doctors were UK, US doctors, and I don't know if it was naive or not, but we just felt like the hospital wouldn't be bombed if there were UK, US doctors there. The building definitely shook because of the intensity and strength of some of the bombs, but we never actually were bombed. But the picture at the bottom, there was a missile that hit the men's surgical unit, and that's the fire that you see at the bottom. And I don't know how close people pay attention to these things on social media, but just with the last 3 or 4 days, there was a siege on Nasser Hospital with the tanks moving in and snipers shooting people through the windows. So there was this general stay away from the windows because the snipers were shooting people through hospital windows. Now, I reached out to the director of nursing of Nasser Hospital this morning, and he said that the tanks had withdrawn. So, small amount of good news that for the moment, Nasser Hospital is doing okay. Thank you. So the clinic, the psychiatry clinic, was actually not part of the mission. The mission was to observe and assess the healthcare workers and come up with kind of a current state so that the phase 2 and phase 3 mental health people could go back to Nasser and say, okay, based on the observation, this is what we think folks need. And then phase 3 was going to be kind of a train the trainer and train the healthcare folks. But I have to tell you, in my experience being there, they know what they're doing. The healthcare workers knew what they didn't need me to teach them what to do. It's unfortunate though, the whole thing fell apart. After I left, shortly after myself and Dr. Wael left, PAMA, the Palestinian American Medical Association, along with about 5, 6, 7 other NGOs were banned. So there was months in 2024, towards the end of 2024, beginning of 2025, where most NGOs were not allowed back in. And then there was a lift to that. And the bottom line is, make a long story short, there was one psychologist who followed us, but not at Nasser Hospital. She went to a different hospital, and she did group treatments and provided some training. And that is all that has happened with the Strengthening Resilience program. It's kind of a victim of the war. It's really difficult to do any kind of long-term planning or setting things up. So myself and Dr. Wael could only spend so much time in a day observing people and doing assessments. And we did a lot of talking to staff and hearing their stories. But the other thing we did while we were there on our own was join the psychiatric clinic at Nasser Hospital. And so this is a photo on the left. All these photos are my own, either that I took or that someone there has sent to me. They're not social media photos. That's Dr. Wael in the foreground, and to the right of him is Dr. Arij, and also people gave me permission to use their photos. Patients, I've blurred out their pictures. And you'll see that Dr. Wael and Dr. Arij are sitting at a table together. They're actually seeing 2 different patients. So Dr. Wael is seeing the man that is leaning on the desk, and Dr. Arij is seeing the man who is sitting in front of her. And then there's a third man with his chin on his hand, who has nothing to do with either of them. He's just waiting in line. Because the room was so small, and these other people standing, who are you? Do you mind backing up a little bit? There's no such thing as HIPAA, or privacy, or things like that. So we were in this single crowded room, no such thing as privacy, hearing bombs. The bomb would go off, the room would rattle, everybody would kind of look at each other and say, yeah, that was far away. That wasn't very close. Move on, keep going. There was no electronic medical record, there was no paper medical record, there was no list of medications. So you were practicing based on what the person who came to the table said, this doctor is my medications, and sometimes they would empty their pockets with the little blister packs and say, you know, I take this one, I take half of that one, and you just kind of went from there. But one thing I did learn over the course of the month, we saw 1,000 patients in a month when clinic hours were about 10 to 1, 9:30 to 1, and we spent about 2 to 3 minutes with patients because the line was so long, and a lot of it was refills, and you had to get through. It was kind of a public health or free clinic, I guess, and there were medications actually behind Dr. Wael's head. You see that cabinet, that was the medication cabinet, and we would get shipments of medications in and then restock it. So this is a bar graph of the most common diagnoses. So we were asked by the World Health Organization to use these diagnostic categories and keep track. You will see that the highest bar is what we refer to as psychotic disorders. So that could be schizophrenia or some other kind of disorder where people kind of lose touch with reality, maybe have delusions or hallucinations of some kind. And you'll notice that there's a very low percentage in the PTSD column. And I wouldn't mind a little bit of interactive dialogue here, if you don't mind. Why do you think the psychotic disorders, we saw so many people with psychotic disorders, why do you think the bucket of post-traumatic stress disorder is so low? Richard?
Because it's not post, it's constant, it's ongoing. So the PTSD is not what's going on, it's PS, you know, traumatic stress syndrome constant.
Richard gives a great point that PTSD by definition means that the episode happened in the past. There is no what they call DSM-4 diagnosis or DSM-5 diagnosis for a situation like this. And even if there was, which I'm probably skipping ahead, even if there was, it's based on considering what is happening to the person to be a disorder and that there is some kind of pathology, right? Is there any pathology to how the people in Gaza are responding to what is happening to them? No. So they didn't neatly fit into PTSD. Well, what do you think about the psychotic disorders being so high? The reality is being so horrible that they had to get away from it. I agree with you. And the other piece of it is, you have to remember, I mean, still to this day, people are living on top of each other. They're in tents, they're in encampments, and if somebody is psychotic and out of control or aggressive, it's hard to live in your tent. It's hard to be a part of the encampment. So I think there was some pressure, either from the patient individual themselves to get treatment, or for the family to seek the treatment for them, because you know, it's different from being depressed or anxious in your tent. Being psychotic in your tent and walking around and causing disturbances is another matter. Next slide, please. So the other issue we had to deal with, again, permission for the photo. This is the medical director for PAMA, his sister. And when you go through the encampments, there are these booths or merchants that sell things. Could be fruits and vegetables, could be car parts. And then there are these little pharmacies. And his sister had a pharmacy. But as I mentioned, we would get shipments of medications in, and so when the patient was in front of us and we would say, okay, here's your refill, they would basically take 2 steps over, and the pharmacist would give them the medicine, so it was all free. But a lot of the medication was, believe it or not, available in these pharmacies in the encampments. But we would run out on a regular basis, of course. We would run out of medication. I was never able to figure out how the ordering worked. Like, who's ordering the medicine? Who's determining what's being ordered? It was just something I couldn't figure out. But I wrote there in the second bullet, Mishmatawaf. I learned how to say Mishmatawaf, which is not available. Somebody would come in and take out the blister pack and say, I need this medication. I'd say, Mishmatawaf, I don't have it, not available. Badil, I can give you an alternative. No, doctor, I need this one. I need this one. This is the only one that helps me. Mishmatawaf, it's not available. There were times where we had one antipsychotic medication. Didn't matter which one you were on, this is the one you got. And it happened to be one that isn't very effective. So, you know, the kind of the moral dilemma of having to prescribe things that you knew weren't going to work. But also, in the course of the month, the destabilization of patients that we saw was very sad, very sad. People that were stable for a long time. Next slide, please. So as far as how to cope, so this kind of goes back to healthcare worker coping, HCW, healthcare worker coping. Us visiting doctors, Wael and myself, we felt such guilt that we are coming from a place where we have everything we need, helplessness, that no matter how much all of us in this room want to help, we know there's people, leaders, supposedly, that we can only do what they, we're powerless unless our leaders decide to do something. But it's just, I can't say anything less than profound to see how the Gazan people react to the situation that they're in. Their level of faith and acceptance and hope was really amazing. And to this day, I just don't know how they do it, that every single day, what they see in the emergency rooms over and over and over again, and they just get up every day and do it again, for 644 days. They are traumatized, they are exhausted, without a doubt. And I've seen, from staying in touch with people, I have seen a shift in their mental health, and I'll get to that in a moment. Next slide, please. As far as how folks coped, I do have a couple of quotes here that we can read together. So some of these quotes, one of them here says, yesterday I had to let someone die. There's a whole other triage system in the emergency rooms there than what you would see in an emergency room here. It could depend on how many patients show up at the same time on their deathbed because of shrapnel or explosive injuries, etc. It could depend on what supplies are available that day. Recently, there was an announcement that came out of Nasser Hospital that they could no longer accept any patients for wound care because they ran out of gauze. There's no gauze. So it depends on the day, really, who you have to set aside, literally set aside and not treat. And when I was there, the bar of that was whether gray matter was showing in your head, which means your brain. So if somebody came in and you could actually see brain tissue, you made them comfortable and you let them be, and you focused on other people. But like I said, it kind of depends on the day. Other people would say, I used to have space where I could go and cry. The hospital would have a room where I could go, or in my home, when I got home, I could cry. But when we were there was no more space like that. People were literally living in the hospitals. People were living in tents with 10 other people. There was no longer anywhere to emote. And one woman said to me, we'll cry when the war's over. You know, we can't cry now, we'll cry when the war's over. And the people that were making these really difficult life and death decisions were very young doctors, junior doctors. And as you know, doctors in healthcare have been targeted, so there's less and less doctors. Next slide, please. So just in the last couple of weeks, I'm going to give you a couple of quotes that show the shift in how people are feeling. This was June 24th, a text message that I received. I'm really struggling these days. Sometimes I feel like I just want to be martyred and leave this world behind. I feel so tired and everything is so heavy. I'm trying to stay strong and keep going, but it's really hard. May Allah give us patience and strength. On July 4th, I received, peace be upon you, sister, how are you? I am not well. Today, the planes targeted our neighbor's house without any warning. 10 martyrs were killed. Their bodies were in pieces. I was collecting their body parts in bags. By Allah, by Allah, I am exhausted. I seek forgiveness from Allah the Almighty and repent to Him. On July 8th, I received, in the morning we woke up to a terrifying nightmare. Corpses and body parts were lying next to and on top of my family's tents after a bombardment of a tent next to them, killing children and women. My brother's children saw the body parts, blood and shrapnel, and they are scared now. There are no words to describe this crime. The same day, my other friend, who I send a lot of money to in my fundraising. This is not through an organization, it's just people give me money from doing these presentations. They say, how can I help? And they give me money and I send it to this one person who distributes it. On July 8th, he sent me 2 days ago, I didn't want you to make the transfer. I was afraid that I would be martyred and the money would be left around my neck. In Islam, there's, I'm not an expert if there's any Muslim in the room and I'm saying this wrong, please correct me, but there's something about not holding your money until you die, like you don't want to leave Earth with a lot of money, and so it's like hanging around your neck on Judgment Day. I don't think I'm saying that right, but he didn't want me to send it to him because it would be hanging on his neck because he was afraid that he would die. So let me talk just a little bit about the limits of Western psychiatry in a wartime setting. So, you know, I come from a clinic in the U.S., and you know, what is it? How different is it to practice in a war setting? So in the U.S., if you were to go to therapy, it's a very individualized approach, right? You come up with a treatment plan based on your issues. But that's a very misaligned compared to what is going on in Gaza, where it's a collective trauma. And the way that you want to address what's going on is in the community. Here we assume safety, privacy, continuity of care, right? You hear these kinds of words. All of that is absent in a wartime setting. In our Western world, I jumped ahead a little while back and I talked about how everything is really based on pathologizing people. In the Western medicine, things are, they medicalize suffering as opposed to honoring survival responses, right? So we have to honor and build on why people are able to survive mentally the way that they are. The trauma protocols that we use are not effective in these situations. There's a type of treatment called EMDR, which has to do with eye movements. Well, you can't do that if somebody is still going through trauma. You know, so things like that can't be used. And to ask people to start talking about their trauma is not going to help them when they might have another 300 days of it. Right? So you can't be opening people up if you can't hold them. And also, there's very little respect for culture. in Western medicine, right? And in Gaza, they're intertwined. There's no way to separate the religion, the spirituality, and the culture from medical treatment. Faith, community, and their resistance narrative is extremely important.
Could you give an example of that? Excuse me, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, no, please, say it again. An example of...
How?
Okay, so in Western medicine, I might talk about coping skills and, can you exercise, can you journal, can you take this medication? There might be kind of a menu of things I offer. I would never say, are you doing your 5 prayers a day? What is your ibadah like, your spirituality? What's your relationship with Allah like? Are you submitting to Allah, or are you angry with Allah? I mean, it's all about Allah. When you're a Muslim, it's a way of life. And to exclude that from the conversation or the treatment is, it just doesn't work. Now I'm sure we could use other religions and other cultures and use similar examples. So I wanted to pause here for a second before I moved into the next slides, which I don't know if we can pull up or not. And the reason that I wanted to pause is because I'm going to move into some graphic images, and if that's triggering for anyone, I wanted to mention that. So I guess I'll just speak to it a little bit. So I don't know if people have heard of WhatsApp, where you can text people in WhatsApp. So I'm in a lot of WhatsApp groups, and one WhatsApp group that I'm in is doctors that have deployed to Nasser Hospital. And of late, the images and the videos that have been coming in are, you see stuff on social media, and even I sometimes feel disconnected. Like, I know it's happening, but having been at Nasser Hospital and seeing the familiar surroundings of the emergency room, and then seeing the videos that are coming in, it's a whole another level. And even I myself sometimes can't download the videos because I don't want to see whatever it is that I'm going to see. But I can tell you that kind of the way it works, as we're, there we go. So I'm on slide 14, trigger alert. There's a bomb, a missile, etc., collapse of a building. There's what's called an MCI, a mass casualty incident. So basically, the emergency room staff or the international staff are waiting for these MCIs to come in. Usually when they come in, there are too many people to treat at one time. There aren't enough gurneys or stretchers for them. There's usually people all over the floor being treated. And at the end of it, once you either pronounce people deceased or get people to radiology, which they actually have down the corridor, the cleaning folks come in, and these are very special men who clean all the blood from, it's like the smell of blood. I don't mean to be so graphic, but when I was there as a psychiatrist, I would ask myself, why am I here in the emergency room? And the English-speaking docs, which most of even the Gazan doctors speak English, would say just your presence here provides comfort to us. And every once in a while, they would ask us to have the difficult conversations with families, like your husband has died or your child has died. Let us help you. So the picture. So both of these are just examples of a bunch of people coming in with some kind of injury. The number of children that are coming through on the videos and the images is really staggering. So you see everybody's on the floor being treated. I mentioned the wound care program already. Next slide, again, trigger warning, this is worse than the first. The slide on the right is patients just being piled onto carts, transporting them to the hospital, trying to get them there for treatment as soon as possible. The picture on the left is, unfortunately, you have to study it, and the amputations that have occurred there are so many amputations that have occurred, and the picture on the left is a man who's had an amputation, but you can see the lower part of his leg was brought in with him to try to keep everything together. If somebody passes away, you want to keep all of them together as much as you can. There are ways to clean the body in Islam, and then wrap them in the white shroud and bury them. Okay, next slide, please. We are, maybe keep your eyes closed if you're still triggered. So the next slide, and then that's it for the graphic photos. How can you help? And everybody's action looks different, right? You can educate, you can donate, you can take care of yourself. Taking care of yourself is actually a form of worship in Islam. The picture at the top is a picture that I took when I was walking through the hospital. Because of the shortage of supplies and access to things, this father was walking around with his daughter holding up the IV bag. Because there's no poles anymore, there's nowhere to sit. I mean, if you're good enough, well enough to walk around like this, you don't need to be in the ED. Move along in a nice way. But I just got the picture on the bottom in my doctor group. I was so struck because I've given this presentation so many times. I know this slide, and then I saw this picture and added it because it's such a not paradox, whatever that word is, but like the similarity. So the picture at the top is the father holding an IV bag for his daughter. The picture at the bottom is the boy holding a pint of blood for his mother. And again, this is the way people are treated on the floor. You do the best that you can. Next slide. And so there's no more, I don't think. I'll let you know if there's any more graphic photos. So I have 3. So, and I also want to officially tell you or be very transparent. I've never asked for money in these talks. This is probably, I don't know, my 20th presentation, and I never asked for money. But this time I'm actually telling you some things that we're raising money for, I'm raising money for. If you want to tune out, that's fine. But when people give me money, I go and I give these talks and they say, how can I give you money? So it's just, I don't know, God has continued to provide, and every month or two I'm sending like $10,000 over there. It's just really a miracle. Depending on the humanitarian aid getting in, one small parcel of fruits and vegetables can cost $30 to $50 US. And the money exchanger that we use requires a certain amount of money before he will accept a transfer. So that's always kind of a working bucket that I have, and then once I get enough money, I send it over. The second is a new initiative, and I'm going to show you a video of it in a second. There is a tent, so amongst the encampment where people are living, there's a tent that is like a mini desalinization plant built from scratch, and I'll show you in the video. That requires $12,000 US. And there's also medical students that have asked for my support. They need money every morning and every evening to get to their clinical rotations, or they need help with tuition. Next slide, please. We're almost done. Okay, so the picture upper right, that's not the parcels that I've been using, but this is another it's not the parcels that I've been giving out, but this is another organization that was able to provide dry goods, flour, rice, lentils, canned goods. And the medical student that received one of these parcels, I'm just showing here a couple of pictures of her cooking. But mind you, there's 10 people in her family tent, and that's not even the whole family. So even though she was so excited to receive this food, it doesn't last very long. The next slide, please. And you can just keep hitting enter, enter. So I just want to show you, this is the brother who said, I was afraid to tell you to transfer the money because I didn't know if I would live until tomorrow, and I didn't want it hanging around my neck. I have hundreds of photos like this of him handing out parcels to people. And the reason why you can't see the recipient, a lot of times people don't want their photo taken. Women in particular don't want their photo taken, but even men are afraid of facial recognition and whether they can really trust you. I mean, there's just so much targeting there.
What kind of targeting?
Sniper. Missiles on your tent, missiles on your home.
Just keep going.
So it's really targeting.
Yes. Yes, keep going until there's no more. I'm just showing examples of all these distributions. Like I said, I have hundreds of them. Keep going. But this is basically what would be okay, stop. Thank you. Water, I talked about the desalinization plant. So the medical student that I've become besties with, these are her two younger siblings, Zina and Ahmed. So they're responsible. I don't know if you've seen the horrible photos where people are all pushing to get a scoop of food into their bucket, right? Well, Zina and Ahmed are responsible for going to get that food. So there they are, and then when it comes to water, on the left, there they are with their empty jugs, and on their right, they're coming back with their full jugs. And the sister said to me, it makes me sad, they're so young to handle these tasks. They take turns collecting water every day, and they wake up early to do it. And they don't always have water every day. So the next slide is a small tent, right? Maybe 10 by 10. And these different parts were collected around by this engineer who, you know those water collection, like black barrels? There's 3 of them in the tent. And then there's this equipment. It's just amazing. And it requires about $12,000. And it will provide water for about 250 families. So that's my next mission, to try to collect about 12,000 US so we can do another one of these tents. My last slide is just a picture of a little, so this one, my last comment is this slide and my contact information. That is a little plastic flower plant. It's about this tall, maybe 4 or 5 inches. And it was a gift from one of the psychiatrists in the psychiatry clinic, because no matter how little they have, they were always giving me gifts. And they were so appreciative for being there, and still say, when are you coming back? And how's your mom? How's your dad? You know, did you make it safely here? Did you make it safely there? And so I have this little flower pot that I will treasure along with my other things that were given to me. So thank you for your time, and I will turn it over.
Let me just say that I do have the video, and I will be distributing it to anybody whose email address is in the back, or anybody's address I already have, so thank you.
Hi, is everybody awake out there too? So just checking in, all right, because it's really hard and very heavy. I will say, again, my name's Ashlee. Many years ago, back in the 90s, I lived in Bethlehem for a year, and I worked with 2 Palestinian organizations, and did alternative travel, among other things. And one of my continuing commitments that I've started just 2-3 years ago, I guess now, is to travel twice a year to take groups and to educate folks about what's happening in Palestine. And actually, in 2023, right, like I was looking at how could we go to Gaza for a day? Like how could we, fit that into the trip? And then, of course, that became impossible. I kind of want to ask a question really quick to this group. Like, we have this saying, I'm sure you know, among clergy, preaching to the choir. We take that literally. But I'm going to just ask, I mean, does everybody have basic knowledge about Palestine, history of Palestine, and what's happening there? I'm going to... Anybody? So not so much, maybe? Okay, all right, that's okay. That's good to know, because it's important to kind of get the big picture. And so what I want to do is just share with you a little bit today about the trips I take, but this is particularly the last trip. I've got it here, so I think I'm good. Thank you. So I'm sure many of you know, a typical trip to the quote-unquote Holy Land that many folks take as pilgrims are Israeli-run trips that are very skewed to show what's happening, or actually to not show what's happening. And many people, I'm just going to tell you, instead of, I'll just say slide, and then you can scroll, because I think it's a scroll situation, right?
Let's see.
Are you clicking or are you scrolling?
I can click.
Okay, great. Do we think it works? Okay.
Is it not?
Well, we'll see.
Okay.
I'll check it out here on the next one. So typically, of course, those kinds of tours travel to many of the religious sites that are important in the history of the three monotheistic religions that are important in the world, right? Christianity, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And so we do go to these places on the trips I take, but the trips I take are not geared toward, like, that's the end of the trip. The end of the meaning of the trips that I take are particularly for expanding and helping people understand what's actually happening. But let's see. Is it the middle big button, right?
Yeah, try it.
Oh.
Go back.
Go back. Oh, it works. Okay. Perfect. So we do go to these sites, and we do talk about not just the religious, we do talk about some of the religious aspects of what's happening in Palestine, because it is an important part of the history, and you can't understand the whole and all of the intricacies if you don't understand that. But at the same time, I will tell you that what's happening in Palestine, as I'm sure you know, is not a religious issue, right? It's an issue of settler colonialism. It's an issue of people who've had their land taken from them, and then their land occupied, and they're trying to survive and resist and maintain their connection to their homeland over the last 77 years, right? So we do get to go to the holy places, and in particular, we've been very, I'll say, blessed to have the opportunity to go to Al-Aqsa. As you see in the photo there, that's inside the Dome of the Rock building on the right, and on the left is the inside of the prayer hall. One of the things I learned actually this last March on my last trip there was that it's important to understand that the mosque is not the buildings. Like, these two buildings are not the mosque, right? Or just the one building. The mosque is the entire compound, in Islamic theology and the understanding, right? So that's another reason why when you hear things about people, settlers and other folks going up there and creating disturbances, that's a part of the issue. It's not that they went in the building or whether they went in the buildings or not. It's about being on that site, right? And not treating it with respect, right? So that's part of it. But again, I'm just gonna go through some things and maybe this will continue to work and maybe it won't. Okay. So one of the most important thing we do is we talk with people. We talk with Palestinians on the ground, and we understand and learn about what their reality is, what their daily lived situation is. This is a beautiful man we had the opportunity to meet actually last November, named Musa, who has since passed away, but was a part of the Afro-Palestinian community in the old city of Jerusalem. When people say Jerusalem has 4 quarters, that was a British thing. There are lots of quarters. There are many, many kind of places where different groups of people live. The British made it nice and like, let's divide it into 4, and you know, the British, you say about them. But I want to just say that on these trips, come on. Nope. What I didn't do, slide. On these trips, I'm just going to start saying slide.
Did you click?
Because it's a little, so go ahead. So really we connect with the people there. And we spend most of our time in the West Bank. Again, most tours, maybe they go to Bethlehem, maybe for an hour, especially if you're talking about like in the Christian community, in the Christian world. People will roll up in their buses, but many times they'll come to Bethlehem, they'll get off the bus, they'll go into the church, they'll be in the church for 45 minutes, they'll come back out, they'll get on the bus, and they'll leave. And that is the extent of their experience in the West Bank. It's also usually their extent of experience with Palestinian Christians. So that's all. So that for 30 years now, this has been a huge concern for me. Like, how can you go and say you're on a pilgrimage, especially within my own Christian community, but have no interaction whatsoever with the local Christian community that's there. So these are just some photos of folks that we typically meet with on the trip. Everyone from Isa Amro, who's a human rights activist, bottom left there in Hebron, to Munther Isaac, who was just most recently the pastor of the Lutheran Church in Bethlehem, who kind of became a little more well-known a year and a half ago when his sermon, Christ in the Rubble, went viral on social media. Nuha Khoury, who is the dean of Dar al-Kalama College in Bethlehem, and Jamil Jawad, who's an organizer with Stop the Wall. So we try to meet with many different groups, many different organizations, slide as many as we can fit into the 2 weeks that we're there. Go ahead and slide. And including the Tamimi family. This is, you're probably familiar with Ahed Tamimi, who was the young woman who slapped the soldier and then was arrested. The big blonde, curly hair. This is her aunt and uncle in their home. They've both been activists for many, many years, as well as many people in that community. Slide. I'm just showing you some of the pictures of the people that we have opportunity, and then I want to spend a little bit of time just going through some of the issues that are faced by people in the West Bank and that have escalated since October 7th. So again, beautiful people that we have had opportunities to connect with on this trip. Sorry, slide. Including, if you know it, if you've been following Ahmed on the right, who runs the educational bookstore in Jerusalem. It's the first time in the last year or so, I would say, like, this bookstore's been around for 30 years. And it's expanded. They have an Arabic section now and an English section, and you can find any book on anything in Palestine. You can find books, recipes. You can find books on being queer and Palestinian. You can find every kind of book in this bookstore. But just this last year, it's been raided twice by the Israeli military and told they're inciting sedition. The attack on books is kind of a new development since the October 7th time frame. and Ahmed went to jail. Alice in the middle picture has land that's just outside Bethlehem that settlers are trying to confiscate. So these are the kind of folks that we're meeting with and talking with on the trips that I lead. And we start with a little bit of the history. We try to help people understand, how did we get here, right? Because we all know, I think most of us know, or at least in this room, but maybe not in our society, what's happening in Gaza, this didn't start October 7th, right? This is a kind of particular time frame that we're in, but the whole of the issues in Palestine did not start just with October 7th. They start 77 plus years ago, right? And I'm not going to take you through the whole history. But for example, it's important to understand what people have been through, what a people have been through, to understand where we are now and how we got here. So you'll see this first slide is the village, go ahead slide, is the village of Lifta, which is in Jerusalem, which is one of the villages, one of the 500 villages that was depopulated in 1948, the time that the Israelis referred to as the independence, War of Independence, and which Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, which means catastrophe, right? When 500 villages were, like Lifta, were destroyed. Many of them had parks put on top of them, and people were made into refugees. 750,000 people were made into refugees at that time, and many of those folks who were refugees fled to Lebanon and to Syria, and to what's now the Gaza Strip, and to what is now the area we call the West Bank, right? So, and they lived at the beginning in refugee camps, and so we visit refugee camp slide. This particular, these images on the left is, on the left is Balata refugee camp in Nablus, and you can see how close and tight. Balata is like one of the most densely populated, 33,000 people. You all don't know Jamaica Plain where I live, but living in the size of Jamaica Pond. So it's the density. It's not like Gaza, but it's again, there's privacy issues. It's like you're living in a very, very tight community. And then this is Ida Camp, just in Bethlehem on the right-hand side. And people went from tents to this house, cinder block house, over the years. And the key, if you don't know, is a symbol of the refugees and their desire and their right to return to their land, to their houses, which may not exist anymore, but many, many, many people still hold the keys to their homes that they fled back in 1948 and is passed down to the next generations. And I'll say more about the refugee and folks' status here in a second. We talk about history that has led up today, like the Oslo slide. So the Oslo Agreement, depending on how you look at it, was a genuine effort for peacemaking and the establishment of a Palestinian state. And what is the West Bank and Gaza? Or if you're more cynical like myself, you see it as another step in the dehumanization and depopulation of the Palestinian community. And because now what you have here, I like to call this, unfortunately, the cancer map, because it looks like an x-ray of what the body, if you have cancer in your body, like in your lungs or something, or tumors, right? What this is in Oslo, the area of the West Bank, which in theory was going to be a Palestinian part of the main part of a Palestinian state, it's cut into pieces, Area A, Area B, Area C. The yellow areas are Area A. This is areas where the Palestinians have the most population, so they're city centers primarily, right? So if you look down in the south, you can see Bethlehem, you can see the Hebron area. If you go to the north, you can see Ramallah and Tulkarm and Jenin and Nablus. So these are areas where there's lots of Palestinian population. The Area B is this amorphous area that exists between Area A and Area C, which in theory was going to be run civilly by the Palestinians and militarily for security by the Israelis, but it's really kind of just blended into Area C. None of these things really exist in this fashion anymore. They do and they don't. But all of the gray area, which is the bulk of the West Bank, is Area C, which is still under Israeli military control. It's all still under Israeli military control, but the reality is you see all those purple dots. Can you see the purple dots? Yeah, there's a lot of purple dots, and those are illegal Israeli settlements. Illegal under international law, because you're not supposed to settle your population into an area that's disputed. It would be like if the Russians right now started like settling people in Ukraine, the parts of Ukraine where they've taken over, right?
How they've been doing that,
I don't know either, but just as an example, right? Like, how hard would that be then to solve the problem that's happening between you, like in Ukraine? If suddenly you have lots of Russians who are like living in an area, and then they don't want to leave, right? You have almost 1 million Israeli settlers living in the West Bank, and the settlements have just increased and increased and increased over the last 20 and 30 years, despite whatever the U.S. government says. Oh, you have to stop the settlements, you know, in order to get the money. Only George H.W. Bush said, stop, or we won't send you the money. Briefly, that happened. And then, of course, the money for the weapons started to flow again. And the settlements started to grow again. I say that because Palestinians are increasingly being contained in smaller and smaller areas. And that's important just to know, like when we see how things have escalated now since October 7th, you see they're already in small, tight areas and controlled, just like Gaza. Gaza was controlled, right, from the outside. Nothing goes in, nothing goes out without Israeli control. Just the same, well, people want to say, oh, Hamas was running it. Well, they're not in control. If you don't have control over the electricity or the water or things coming and going, you're not in control, right? So, and of course what's happening in Gaza as well now is you see people being pushed into smaller and smaller spaces within Gaza, right?
I think we're only about 20%, but they allowed only 20% of the land now.
It's very small, and I read this morning, I think, that the space per person in Gaza, what they're being allowed into right now, is less space than people have in Guantanamo. So, what's happened since October 7th? So everything I'm about to say has been going on since 1967 and then before, within now what is Israel, especially like in the Galilee area.
October 7th.
Right.
It's foolish, because I've been to the West Bank.
Right.
I've lived in the West Bank, and I know what it's like.
Right.
And
It's been happening for a long time.
This is crazy. I see Israelis walking around, and West Bank people have to stop, and are stopped and searched, and told to go to the mountains if they want to go to Bethlehem, or if they want to go to
So we're coming to this,
You know, I've seen that, and I saw that 20 years ago.
Yes, so that's the thing. This has been going on a long time. So I just for folks who may not know as much about it, I want to just be clear, you know, nothing just started. It has been going on for at least 30 years, if not more.
The October 7th is an American thing.
The October,
As far as I'm concerned, I mean, it's just so crazy.
but one of the things that has happened since then is there has been a marked escalation of things. So where you have the genocide happening in Gaza, in the West Bank, it's a slower, the end, I feel like, the goal is the same, but it's a much slower process. But that slow process has also been escalated, and it's being carried out with more impunity, right? So even what it was before, that's just all increased and ramped up. So for example, you see the checkpoints. Checkpoints have been around for a long time. When I lived in Bethlehem 30 years ago, it was fairly new, because I was there during the whole Oslo time, and there was a new checkpoint. And it was like, you know, a guy, it was kind of like the picture on this side, on the left, where, but it was just one tower, a guy, you know, with a gun in the tower, kind of just temporary type of setup, and then you know, 2 or 3 people on the street, and they'd stop the car, they'd stop the taxi, they'd ask for ID. But that's what the checkpoint in Bethlehem looked like 30 years ago. Prior to that, there wasn't a checkpoint. People could move freely. Same with Gaza. I've been in Gaza. When I went to Gaza 30 years ago, you changed vehicles at a gas station so that you were in a UN-plated vehicle and not an Israeli-plated vehicle, just, you know, and that was it. There was no fence, there was no border, it was open like that. That was all we did. And now, of course, we know how completely enclosed those places are. The checkpoint that's from Bethlehem to Jerusalem, not only did it take more of Bethlehem's land, like it came further into Bethlehem, right? So it took a whole piece, a hunk of the land from Bethlehem, but now it's like going through an airport kind of checkpoint. It's just big concrete and turnstiles and the whole.
And the Israelis that come in and take the land from the Palestinians, their attitude is, hey, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to.
Oh yeah, the famous quote.
And that's how their
Yeah.
attitude is.
Yeah.
They just take their land and tell you, hey, suck it up.
Yeah.
If I don't do it, somebody else is going to.
Mm-hmm. So these checkpoints have grown, right, over these years. But since October, the ramping up has been in Bethlehem. There's now, you know, maybe there were I don't know, maybe there were 30 checkpoints because I don't know the exact number. But now there's like 100, right? And so they're not like as big like as the one on the right, and they're not formal, but they're informal checkpoints. So there are rocks that are blocking the road, so you can't go that way anymore. Or there are big gates that swing closed and open or closed depending on whenever the Israeli soldiers just happen to decide that they want it open or closed. So you might live, I might be trying to come see you and we're 5 minutes away, or take my child to school, and instead of driving 5 minutes, I have to drive 30 minutes.
Go through the mountains?
Yes, and have to drive some random way in off-road, you know, in order to get to you or in order to get my child to school. So it just is, it's a part of the increasingly making life unlivable, miserable for the people. Here's another checkpoint. This is going out of Nablus. You can see the army, they're stopping the truck. There was also an ambulance in front of, they stopped the ambulance, they stopped us. And this is going out, like people driving out of Nablus the day we were there. These are all my pictures. So, checkpoints. So, containment, lack of movement, right? One of my friends says, like, guns, gates, and Gazification in the West Bank, right? That's kind of her, that was her 3 Gs. But gates, right? You're increasingly not allowed to move. Slide, thank you. Slide, yes, and here, so home demolitions. They've been happening for 30 years. Again, increasing numbers of homes of folks being demolished because in theory, like, they don't have a permit. They're never given permits.
Right.
They're never given permits. If your family expands, you have to live somewhere. So you build maybe up top on your house, or you build a house next door. But if you don't have a permit, they come, they tear it down, or you can tear it down yourself if you don't want to pay the bill for them tearing it down. You get charged for them tearing it down. You have to pay like thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, like, tens of thousands of dollars. The house sits on the left here. Is in Silwan, which is a village just outside the old city of Jerusalem. This is a whole other conversation around how Palestinians are being displaced, not just for settlers and not just for the land, but also what they want to do here is the Israelis want to put is a theme park. I'm going to call it a Bible theme park, right? There's an area, it's called the City of David, and they're doing some archaeology there, which is super questionable, and they're demolishing homes because part of what they want to do is they want to make like a gondola, that goes from the Mount of Olives over to the city of David, and you have to place, you have to have places to put that. So they're talking about it as if it's like eminent domain type of things, but the goal is, of course, less Palestinians. I mean, the goal of a settler colony, as we know here in this country, which I think we don't like to talk about it, like in our public, in our circles. This is part of the reason I think it doesn't get talked about as much, is because we are a settler colonial country, and a settler colonial country. The goal is to have as much land as possible with as few of the indigenous population as possible. And however you get rid of those people, whether you make their lives miserable or whether you kill them, that's generally the mentality, right? So continued house demolitions, then where do those folks go? Where do they live, right? They have to find alternatives. But that continues to increase radically. Slide, please. And the settlements continue to expand. So on the right-hand side, you can see, sorry, left-hand side. The left-hand side, you can see what I would call a double wide, because I'm from the south, or they would call a trailer, a caravan. This is a new settlement development. Sometimes settlements just start with a little hut on a hill. They're usually on the hilltops. On the one I'm talking about with the caravans is in the Masafra area, south of Hebron. They just start with these caravans, and then they grow, and then they start to look like the slide on the right, which is just kind of in, basically it's Bethlehem land, but they're talk about it as Jerusalem. And then slide, if you keep going, you can see also there's buildings that have been taken over and also made into settlements. That's in the heart of Hebron, where a lot of apartments and buildings and land, property that was already there was taken over by settlers, and now Palestinians can't move or function in that area of Hebron at all. And then you look at the right, the picture on the right, which is a settlement called Nebi Daniel. That's about like, it goes on like, imagine like 4 more of those pictures at least, right? So they're not, so when people talk about settlements, they're not just like a few people like in a tent, right? Some of the biggest settlements, like Ma'ale Adumim, have 100,000 people who live there. Now, how would you make a Palestinian state in the West Bank, with the West Bank as part of that, right? When you have 1 million illegal settlers. Speaking of, slide, my friend Allison is here, taking a selfie. But if you look at the men behind her, your first thought is they're the Israeli military, but they are not. They are settlers. This is in the Masafra area of Hebron. If you have not seen the movie No Other Land, which is specifically set and about the Masafra area, south of Hebron, please, 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 please find a way to see it. It's an excellent film. But they're settlers. They dress like they're military. They have machine guns. The government distributed machine guns to them, right? And Humvees, so they can kind of, get around, little, like, maybe the smaller, but, small vehicles so they can get around, so that they can harass people, which is what they do. Settlers come in a wide range of, sorry, I'm being a little sarcastic, flavors, a wide range of attitudes, right? You have folks who, like, the people who live in Ma'ale Adumim. That's a Jerusalem, quote unquote, Jerusalem neighborhood. It's like the burbs, as far as they're concerned, and they get to live there and it's subsidized, right? So it's cheap to live there. The government wants them to live there. They want to fill these homes with Jewish Israelis. You have to be a Jewish Israeli, not any other kind of Israeli, in order to live in these places. Most of those folks are not necessarily like hardcore ideologues, right? They just, they're Zionists, but it's close to Jerusalem, they can get to work, it's convenient, it's cheap. They're thinking in those kind of terms. When you talk about the folks like the men behind my friend Allison, when you get to the areas like Masafra Yatta, many of these settlers are much more hardcore. They are true believers. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them are true believers that God gave us this land. The Bible, our Bible says so. Therefore, it is mine. You have no right to be here. And I can do anything I want with full impunity to you, to get you out of my land. Because that is, even though they might be from New York, right? As many, many settlers are from the United States.
But the interesting thing is that we support them.
Oh, yeah.
And we support them physically, we support them with guns, with power, and you know why? Because it's all got to do with money.
Oh, yeah.
It's all got to do with money.
There's money, there's power, there's influence.
AIPAC has so much power in the Senate, in the Congress. They have power it's really our pressure.
Yes.
It's only going to change things.
Right.
It's American pressure on the American people that will change things, but nothing else is going to change.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I think there's so much that we can do here and that we have to do here. Why do we send billions and billions of dollars every year to Israel? The settlers and Israelis get free education, free health care. We don't have that here.
That's like we're taking away health care from people here, taking away education.
Right, yes, exactly. We're taking away health care. We're going to have
And also foreign troops. We also do things about foreign troops, but.
Yeah, people on Medicare are going to be out picking our vegetables soon, right? I mean, so this is also part of this bigger picture and how the role that America plays, which is huge. People joke and say Israel is our 51st state, which in many ways is true. So, I'll spare you the story of the guys on the right-hand side. We got stuck in Hebron for a few hours because they wouldn't let us through the gate because we'd been to see the human rights activists and they just wanted to harass us. So, minor issue in the life of a Palestinian, mind you. But this, as you can see, these this next picture, you can see the car with the window. This is in Masafriata. This is in a village called Susia. Again, the folks from No Other Land, I've met many of them in this area, and they're very proud of that film, so I do want to encourage you to go see it. It gives you really good perspective on what it's like to be in that situation. But again, the settler attacks of folks, not just in this area, but all across the West Bank, have increased because no one stops them. So the impunity, the sense that we can do whatever we want because no one ever stops them. So yesterday, if you haven't heard, in the north of the West Bank, in a village called Sinjil, that has just been surrounded by a 20-foot high fence with barbed wire, so the whole village is now enclosed in this fence. There was a Palestinian-American boy, he's 20 years old, younger than my kids, who was killed, beaten to death by settlers yesterday. He went to see his family. He's born and grew up in Florida. And yesterday was beaten to death. But this is happening more and more and more, and the aggression of the settlers and pushing people off their land and the attacks of people just continues to grow. This was actually on the right, was a group of Israeli young people who had come to help pick the olives of this farmer in Susia. And we had come to visit, but I think we kind of actually, like, those settlers that I showed you in the previous, they called the military, and then the military came to where we were, and so they did this whole, like, why are you here, talking to the Israeli young people. But the Israeli young people have a degree of protection, right? So they have privilege, and so in a way, them coming is an act of solidarity or an act of it's a way of being a human shield, just like what Dr. Weidner was saying, because their presence there makes it harder for the military to act in ways. They still do, but it's harder for them to act in ways that will cause long-term harm to people. And then the next slide, please. And this is in the Al-Aqsa compound up on the plaza there, and you see to the right a group of settlers who've come to be in the mosque because their vision is for the mosque to be turned into the temple. again, to make a third temple, and there's an actual active movement that's about that. In fact, there was an Israeli soldier who was killed in Gaza, and there was a video of his funeral where one of his colleagues was talking about how great it was that every day he came home he felt successful because there were 200 more Gazans dead, and that soon, and very soon, their vision of the new temple was going to come to pass. So this is this isn't just, it's not just the fringe anymore. This is the mainstream. And you see they are accompanied by the Israeli military. So when people say, oh, the settlers are here and the military is here, that's not true. They are one entity, right? They're one entity. Often when Palestinians are being harassed by settlers and they call the police or the military, they get arrested, not the settlers. And also, I just want to be really clear, especially for folks who are still learning about this, it's not because they're Jewish that it's a problem that they're there, right? When I was with my friend who was taking us around, we ran into some Israeli, they were young women, and they were visiting, and they were there, and they were, taking selfies and pictures with, with the rock building in the back, and he said hello, and they said hello, and it was fine, right? The problem is what the settlers are trying to do isn't come there with respect, isn't come there, they're coming with an agenda, right? They're coming with an agenda and an identity of supremacy. And that's what the problem is. All right, next slide. So the settler aggression has increased significantly since October, in the last year and a half. The Israelis also have increased the number of Palestinian prisoners that are being held. Probably prior to October, there might have been around 5,000-ish folks, mostly who are political prisoners, right? Or maybe a kid who threw a rock, because there are children also in Israeli prisons. But maybe they were seen as a threat, or they were involved, maybe you're involved with Islamic Jihad, or we have whatever reason they say. There's a lot of reasons people, that are said against people, or sometimes no reason at all, because Israel picks up people and puts them into prison under a thing called administrative detention, where they don't charge them. There's no charge. You don't know why you're arrested. It's kind of like what's happening now here with our immigrants, community.
Guantanamo Bay.
Right? So, why am I being arrested? They don't have to tell you. And they can hold you for 6 months. And they can renew and renew and renew indefinitely. So you can be held. So when people talk about Israel as a democracy, I want y'all to think about some of these things that happen regularly, that are a part of their common way, that are not what many of us would think should happen in a democracy, right? But since October, that number of folks in prison has doubled. There are at least 10,000 folks in Israeli prisons. There is lots of evidence and statistics to talk about how they are tortured regularly. It is a common experience of most Palestinian men, in particular, and women too, but who've been in Israeli prisons, who are tortured. And that gets into a lot of mental health needs in the community, not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. Even 30 years ago, there was a married old brother who I met who was there, and he did bioenergetic therapy. And he'd talk about it as he'd talk about it to people as massage, because there was still some stigma in that community about mental health care, and there may still be some, I think less than used to be, but they would come because they were so traumatized, and because they'd been tortured in prison, but they didn't have anywhere to talk about it. And so he would use this bioenergetic methodology to help them kind of move those emotions and feelings through their system. And under the guise of massage, so that people wouldn't feel afraid or embarrassed to go, or that they weren't tough enough, right? By the way, the sign, if you don't read Hebrew, says "We will win," which is a post-October 7th sign that's on the prison there. Next slide. And we know that the Palestinians as a whole are kept in the West Bank and Gaza too are kept in a giant prison, which is surrounded by a massive concrete wall that doesn't really keep anybody who wants to do something like, you know, a bus bomb. Let's just say we don't like that, we don't want that. I don't. This doesn't keep people who want to do those kind of things out. I'll just say that. It's meant to make life miserable and impossible for the majority of the Palestinian people, so that they're like, what, there's nothing here. Why would I raise my children here? My children have no opportunity here. Hey, I got a third cousin in the United States. I can go there. I can go to Chile. There are more Bethlehemites in Santiago, Chile than there are in Bethlehem, because of, over the years, the immigration. And I'll just say this as well, as many people in the right-wing Christian world will say, oh, it's because those Muslims are so bad to them, the Christians. That's not true. It's because of the occupation. It's because of the Israeli occupation. Are there issues between neighbors, whether they're Christians and Muslims? Sure. Because, you know, nobody has issues with their neighbors, right, here. No, people live together, issues happen. But these things have nothing to do with, you know, because Palestinians are very clear that we are Christians, we are Muslims, you know, Israeli bullets don't discriminate. Next slide, and I'll just say another word, I'm sure I'm out of time, about water. Oh yeah. So water is also a huge issue in the West Bank, in a different way than in the Gaza Strip, but people, for many years, Palestinians have had their water stolen from them. They're under the West Bank is a huge aquifer. That's where the aquifer is. But a lot of the water that comes from the Sea of Galilee is diverted by Israel. And so the Dead Sea, by the way, is dying. If you ever get a chance to go, you'll see the Dead Sea is about half the size that it used to be, because the water doesn't come down the Jordan River anymore. It's all diverted. So that settlers can have pools, right? But Palestinians, like in Bethlehem, have to collect the water when the water comes on. Maybe it comes on twice a week. You fill up your tank, it's on your roof. This is how you can distinguish usually between a Palestinian community or village and a settlement. If you're not sure, look on the roof, because Palestinians always have the water barrels. And if they run out, then they pay the Israeli water company to buy water. So you can see there's just the levels of injustice there. And of course that continues and expands. This place on the left is in the Jordan Valley. It's just a water area that they've fenced off. And then again, settlers divert the water, they take the water, they make it impossible for the local Palestinian farmers and shepherds to access the water. Next slide, and these there's so many organizations in Palestine. They're trying to work to, one, against the injustice, two, to make life better for their community. For example, this is the Hope Flowers Kindergarten, amazing, wonderful little school in Bethlehem. You can see the settlement of Efrat towering over it there. And sometimes the settlers come over and harass the kids in the school. But folks are really trying to do the work to try, because all the kids are traumatized in one way or another. Again, it's not to the level of Gaza, even though some people talk about Gazification of the West Bank, because you start to see now refugee camps being torn down, right? And in Jenin and Tulkarm, and like 40,000 people displaced. So that's a huge number comparatively, you know, for the West Bank. It's still not Gaza. I was on a call the other day, and a wonderful human rights activist, she said, yeah, I'm not really comfortable with saying Gazification, because what's happening in Gaza is beyond the pale, right? So it's not to that degree, but it's going in that same direction. Next slide. We also visit with organizations like Defense for Children International, and Ademir. Defense for Children works with and advocates for and records children who are in the military court system in Palestine, of which there are many, and then Ademir is a prisoners organization to support prisoners, the many that I was just speaking of. Both of these organizations Israel has declared as terrorist organizations. So, and the big one that they really want everybody to think is a terrorist organization, next slide, is the United Nations Relief Works Agency. UNRWA, which really meets the needs since 1948, has been meeting the needs of Palestinian community who've been made refugees. When food goes into Gaza, and now they're shipping it to 4 aid sites with American mercenaries shooting at people, Squid Game people keep referencing. UNRWA has a sit-up. They have organization, they have a plan, they have a way that works, right? Because they've been serving this community for 70 plus years with, not just with food, but with schools and with health care and with other kinds of community needs and services. So it's important to, another way of giving is to support UNRWA, because the United States has defunded UNRWA. We were one of the biggest giver to UNRWA, and now they're functioning without the funds from the United States. So support of UNRWA is also an important piece if that's something you can do. I'll just flip through this, and then when I talk about what we do, of course I talk about Gaza, and I just want to read, because I know our time is basically done. Next slide. You all have probably seen that. If you haven't, find this map. It looks like the United States, since colonization, and how much used to be land for Palestine, and now how much they actually have access to, which you see on the right. Those are Area A's, the little dots in the middle, and Gaza. And of course, Gaza doesn't probably count anymore, right? Because it's just going to be
But this is a pre.
It's going to be a Riviera.
It's a pre-2000, the 2022 map or something like that, not current map.
So that's basically still accurate, yes, on the right. But that map has been out for a few years, yeah, but it's still basically correct. Slide, and then of course you know what, because if you've seen any of the pictures of Gaza, you know what that looks like. I just want to close with, because I'm a pastor, I want to close with 2 poems. 3 points and a poem, no, 2 poems. Slide. This is a poem by a Palestinian poet from Gaza, Musab Abu Toha, and it's called For a Moment. Her small body rides in my arms as I run to the hospital. There is no electricity, and the inner hallways are a forest lined with cots. The girl I carry is dead. I know that. The pressure of the explosion tore apart her thin veins. I know she is dead. But everyone who sees us runs after us. You are alive for a moment when living people run after you. And then to go to the next 2 slides. I want to read one more poem, if it didn't disappear from my phone, which it might have. Sorry. 1 second. Yep, there we go. This is a poem that I wrote about 6 months into this current genocide in Gaza. I wish there was a poem that would end this war. I wish there was a poem that could bring Reem back to her grandfather. A poem that had the power to rescue Hind from that car and stop toddlers from shaking in terror. I wish there was a poem that would stop the bombs and tanks and drones. I wish for a poem to remove the rubble in Al Zaytun and rebuild that sweet cafe by the beach so Bisan and her best friend could meet again for tea. Is there a poem that can heal Motaz and Wael? Is there a poem that can paint and sing and write and dance like Hiba and Rafat? Is there a poem that restores hands and feet to amputees or raises doctors from the grave? I need a poem that loves the Luga Arabiya, Musakhan, Dabke, and Samud. I need a poem that believes settler colonialism is wrong, no matter who perpetrates it. I need a poem to prevent torture and to release captives from military prisons. I need a poem that will stop America sending weapons to Israel. I need a poem that feeds the children being starved and ends the laughter of soldiers on a killing spree. I need a poem to make international law apply equally to everyone. I need a poem where God is not exclusive, a poem to bring liberation from the river to the sea. Where are those poems? Why is no one writing them? Why are they not read aloud or screamed from the rooftops? I wish there was a poem that could save Gaza, a poem that would free Palestine. I put pen to paper, but there are no words. Thank you all. We're at the end of the time technically, but we started late, so if you have any questions or comments or things you'd like to, discuss, I have a few more minutes, so I'll just open it for that.
I have a question in terms of the donations. Well, I speak very well. So.
Okay.
What, is there something in the back that shows how we can do the donations?
Yes, we have two papers right over there. There are graphics.
Okay.
There's Zelle and address to send your check to.
Okay.
So, and there's even the paper you can take with you with all the information on it.
Wonderful.
And I'll do a shameless plug that, so my last trip was in March. I was planning to go in August, but because of the stuff with Iran, we had to postpone. But I am taking another group at the end of October, early November. So if you have interest in that, I'll just say one thing about it, which is that it's important to see what's happening and to realize, to see it up close and personal, and to hear people's stories about the injustice and the hardships. But the trip is not just about that. It's really, really important for me to have folks who go to Palestine with me also experience the beauty of the place, the beauty of the culture, the generous hospitality that is just beyond description. The way people are open and welcoming, the art, the culture, that's a very, very important part of that kind of a trip as well. And for me, I think it's what helps in the long haul of the struggle toward justice in Palestine, because being there, seeing it, you know the depth of what's wrong, but you can also see how lovely and how wonderful it could be. And I think that's really important.
I have a question for the psychiatrist. I'm sorry.
No, what I
Good.
just want to say is, I think that this is wonderful, absolutely wonderful, because you've just shown us humanity. But I think the important thing in this country is to get in touch with your congresspeople, because we're giving money. And the reason we're doing it is because they get money.
Mm-hmm.
All of our guys, there's a list of them, who take money from APAC, we should be writing to them that take money from APAC and accusing them of
Selling out? Yeah, AIPAC, if you don't know, is the American Israel Political Action Committee. And they give money to almost every senator and representative.
But they not only give money, but they threaten our congressmen. If you don't do what I tell you, if you don't stand up for Israel, I'm not going to give you any money, or I'm going to stop giving you money.
I just wanted to give a gentle reminder. I did forget to say that once we come into our discussion and question and answer period, we're asking questions and trying not to make statements. So having said that, if we do have questions.
I'm sorry. I like to
Mrs.
speak
Jones, shut up.
to the
Please.
doctor. Did you get an opportunity to get into the mind of the Israeli soldiers, to get into them, to try to understand who they are, how they have become these monsters, so to speak. As a psychiatrist, I assume that would be part of your interest, to try to understand that.
No, I don't have any interest. Margaret has asked me similar questions many times, like how did they get this way? How do they perform these acts? I cannot put any energy into that. You know, they're indoctrinated into believing a certain way about Gazans and Palestinians, and my capacity is only to support Palestinians.
I understand, Doctor, and I'm not criticizing in any way.
I'm not a forensic psychiatrist. I don't have any training in forensics, so it's just not an area that I have been able to put any effort into.
The reason I asked the question, besides my general interest in what's happening in Palestinians and being very supportive of that, is that in this country right now, we have a collection of thugs, and they're called ICE, and their attitudes towards the people that they were going after is reminiscent of how the Israelis talk about how they go after Palestinians. And so the comparability I thought was interesting, and see whether or not, as a psychiatrist, you would say, I've seen this before. That's the only reason I asked you.
I think there's a lot to be, I'm not a psychiatrist at all, or a doctor, but I do think that there's so much to be understood about the level of indoctrination that happens, and not just in schools, but also like religious teaching. And when I think about, again, from my own religious community, and I think about how many Christians have been sold this bill of goods called Christian nationalism, which actually has not anything to do with our actual religious, practice. But I think Zionism is like the foreign policy of Christian nationalism. Like it's Jewish nationalism, right? It's Jewish supremacy, and so I think
because I think and a jihad, I guess, is Islamic nationalism. So I guess it's all.
Everyone can be
there's nationalism in multiple religions.
There's Hindu nationalism now in India, and they're burning mosques and churches, and so there's any religious tradition is open to this, right? And not just religious traditions. You can be secular and still believe you're in white supremacy, or that you're supreme somehow, or better than other people. It's not just a religious thing, but I do think that that's, I don't know, I think we need, that is a big piece of it, and it is very true that Israeli children, since they're very young, are indoctrinated into that, and taught, also if they're religiously taught that by some of the rabbis there. Not all of them, of course, there's some.
Is there a question in the back?
Yeah, for you. On your graph about the levels of mental illness that you saw, how does that compare, like a spike in, I think you said, was it specifically like schizophrenia or that type of mental illness was very high in your graph?
Yes. Well, I'm sorry, what's the question?
Well, the question is, do you think that's specifically that type of attributable to what's happening in Gaza? Or how does it compare to, say, our population as far as schizophrenic level? Is it something that...
Yeah, I thought that's what you were asking. I just wanted to clarify. Yeah, so if you were to create a similar graph in a traditional outpatient clinic here in the US, anxiety and depression would be the ones that are very high, right? Very high incidence of depression and anxiety. I think the prevalence rate of schizophrenia is about 1% of the population. I believe that the graphic is, I kind of said it earlier, but I think that people with psychotic disorders, they don't really have a choice but to get their treatment, because the consequences or the sequela of not getting treatment in an encampment or in the situation where they're living, there's a lot more consequences of that. Whereas people with anxiety and depression, it's more of an internalizing disorder where you find a way to cope, even if you're severely anxious or severe, and there's severe OCD, severe anxiety, people with panic attacks, it's all there. And they do come in for treatment, but it doesn't present itself in a way that's going to disturb an encampment the way that somebody with a psychotic illness is. So I believe that family members make sure that those folks get treatment.
So
But is it, one follow-up, and then
Do you mind coming forward, because I can't really hear you?
I'm just curious if
Can you come
there's
to the
any-
mic, actually?
The mic? I'm just curious if there's any people that weren't diagnosed
Yes.
before this.
Yes, saw
And
that.
how that might have
Yes.
spiked that.
I remember, for example, one young man, probably 17, 16 years old, a tall boy, like 6 feet or so, came in with his father, and he was mute. And this was new, and it was post a bombing of his family, where he had lost family members. But it was still in a psychotic spectrum, but of trauma, like a acute stress reaction, where he presented to the clinic completely mute, walking around or standing, sitting, looking at us, but really not sure what to make of his surroundings and preoccupied with internal things. So yes, it happened. There is another significant group in that one bar of folks that maybe already had an underlying vulnerability, that just the constant bombing and maiming and everything pushes people over the edge. It's Margaret.
Reverend Ashlee, if there are people who would want more information on a solidarity tour, will you be leaving a
Yes.
way to contact you? So
Yes,
that-
I can give my email, and you can just email me, and I'll get you all the info.
I think
It's very easy.
my email is on the
It is.
donation, so you don't have to pick it up just to donate if you want to contact me. I'm creating a website that I will be able to put speaking engagements, but it's not done yet.
That's great.
First, I want to say thank you. So, special those calls. I did have a question. I'm involved with the substance abuse community locally, and have some insight. I'm also aware of people in the Muslim community worldwide who have substance abuse issues. And I just thought I'd ask, have you heard any substance abuse problems within the refugee camps there?
There was, yes. I had a little bit of an internal conflict with this issue because, no, I'm not going to remember the word that was used. I don't know if it was addict or
junkie?
no. Keep going. No, it wasn't junkie. Wasn't addict. But there was, and I politely would sometimes try to, use a different word, like substance use disorder, because I felt the word that was being used was a tad pejorative. But there definitely is a substance use problem. There were certain medications available in the clinic that they had to be careful who they gave them. Although that was really hard to get your hands on. Even in the emergency rooms, they didn't use any morphine at all whatsoever. The only pain medication they used for severe trauma was ketamine. But there were like disturbing synthetic drugs available that people were addicted to. So, which also could be a subcategory in the psychotic bar, people that were inhaling or using some kind of substances. So it was definitely a problem. And you tended to get the vibe from the other people in the clinic when folks came in that they were known substance users and would be treated a certain way. I mean, there just was little capacity to do treatment. When I was there, the psychiatrists were doing 100% of the treatment, meaning 100% of the treatment was medication administration. If you wanted any kind of, to talk to the psychologist or the psychiatric nurse that was also in the room doing nothing, and I'm not saying that like any in disrespect, it was because it was a small room, there was no space and there was no privacy. If I said, do you mind talking to this person with panic disorder and teaching them how to abort their own panic attack? You had to take them into the hallway and stand in the hallway and stand very close together and try to teach them in that kind of an environment. And it's no different now. So to do like a substance use group or any kind of group therapy, it all has to get deferred.
Can I ask you where you get your donations from?
I would say half individuals and some religious organizations.
And yours also?
One more time?
And yours also, I'm sorry.
Meeting people who like come with me on the trip, or
Yeah, how do you supply the money for your trip?
so people pay. You have to pay.
Okay.
Yeah. I try to keep it as low as possible. And I do look. There was one trip where I was able to find some funders to help some young activists go, because folks they're already involved. But being there and seeing it again, I think it helps you to do this work for the long haul, not just in a short time period. But also, even if you know all the things, seeing it is different, right? And being in that context is different. So, and a lot of younger people, can't afford to go. I mean, because I try to keep it cheap, but it's still expensive. It's still expensive, and we're there for 2 weeks because I feel like if you're going to go, and many people only go once, we might as well do as much as we can. So it's 2 weeks. Yeah.
Young people?
I take anyone who wants to go. Almost, I would say. There's people in my church. There's people in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood in Boston. There's other clergy that I've known. There's and across religious or not religious. I mean, for me, it's educating about the situation. And I mean, religion. We talk sometimes about religion, but it's not a religious trip per se, right?
And you mentioned refugees. There's so many Gaza and Palestinian refugees. There's a lot in Egypt. So that is another. I also fundraise for families who are refugees in Egypt trying to start a new life that maybe need a little bit of seed money to start a small business. They have no status in Egypt. They don't have a refugee status. They get no benefits. So there's a whole underground of volunteers and charities that kind of fly under the radar, helping thousands and thousands of Palestinian refugees, for lack of a better
I
word.
go to the UPA. Is that, do you consider that
What does it stand for?
United Palestinian?
Appeal. Yeah.
Is that,
I mean, I've heard of them. I'm not as familiar with them, but I mean, as far as I know, they're an up and up organization. More like the JP for Palestine group that meets at our church. They've done a lot of fundraising with the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, and ANIRA, Heal Palestine. So there's just some other, so there's a different variety of organizations. I mean, there's a lot of different organizations really trying to do good work.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, you did.
I thought I saw his hand. Any other questions? I just want to say again, thank you very much for being willing to be here and listen.